My mother was one of the brightest people on the planet. She developed Alzheimer's quite a number of years ago, and she lived with it for about 5 years. And I realized after things started to go really awry that there were a lot of things about her that I just simply did not know. Because my mother was a very proud Scots lady, and she didn't really give a lot of herself. You couldn't find out much about her because she never talked about herself. She talked about us. She talked about her children. She talked about her parents and her ancestors. She never talked about herself. I found poetry in a closet in a shoebox after she died that she'd written when she lived in Montreal. Anyway, the book is called Looking for Mother, and I'm just going to read a couple of things from it. I think I'll start reading The Kitchen on McGill Avenue. My father's a teacher, and my mother stayed home with her family. We were poor in the 50s. The dull green linoleum on the kitchen floor grew duller under her scrub brush, while Cyril and I ran outside, and Anne-Marie slept under the tiny maple on the still, grassless front yard. Mother's days were long. Dad was playing squeers at Queen Square School. Mom had uncovered fire from overnight ash and tossed hard coal scuttled from the basement mountain, whose dust coated everything in our house, on the basement furnace and the Enterprise kitchen range. She had no fridge yet. Butter floated in a bowl, meat in containers, milk bottles stood in sink water. And the water she changed every hour all summer long. And there were no appliances. Our bread was hand-mixed with flour from the pull-out bin, whose nutty, thick slices we toasted black and smoky at the end of a fork, above red-hot coals in the stove. All meals were simple, and they were quite repetitive, and we ate fresh produce from the corner store, peeled and chopped with a single paring knife, potatoes, carrots, and a good roast of that was cooked black, or fat squares of lean stew meat, but always there on time, and no one ever went without. The ironing board, which dropped out of the wall, was shared with cousins from the country who lived with us, so they could go to school in town. And boarders who had a fridge, an electric stove, a radio, and the Barbara Ann Scott doll my sister never did, and they lived upstairs. They helped pay the bills and buy the new washer. Laundry that Mom once washed, kneeling beside a galvanized tub and wrung by hand, now sloshed in the white porcelain tub. And it was guided between white ringers. One time her fingers got jammed. She pulled the emergency lever and held them under cold water. They swelled like fat sausages, but she didn't complain. Things took a little longer, but everything got done. And there was no radio for company. Silence was the only music Mom ever sought. Her favorite thing, she told me once, was standing on the back step in the sunshine, hanging out our underclothes in the frosty air, each steaming item a censer, sending up a prayer of thanks. Thank you very much. You don't need to clap every time if you don't, but I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Okay, before long, she got Alzheimer's, to make a long story short, and we were kind of stupid. We didn't really notice it at first because she was quite clever, even though she was losing a lot of her control. She found ways to fool us and trick us. And anyway, she ended up in the Sacred Heart home. And this is one I wrote after my first visit when she was in the ward in the Sacred Heart home. Dark watchers waiting. Through the 5th floor window of my mother's ward in the Sacred Heart home, I watch dark, ominous crows glide in and out of nowhere, hover just outside, watching us. A dying sun paints the harbor. City lights pop like time-lapse mushrooms. I remember worrying, 6 years old, wondering what lurked in the coal black corners, disturbed the dust bunnies under me. When I could not bear the dread, I would call her and she would come. I call her now, dreading the dark shades in the dusky sky. She smiles, looks, wonders who I am. I think I'll do something else now. I spent a lot of time when I was a kid at my grandparents' place. We lived in Charlottetown. My grandparents' place was in rural PEI. This was pre-electrification. They had no appliances, no electricity. They had a pump. They pumped, and for me, it was like it was an adventure. It was like time travel. We went back in time, and I loved every minute of it because I was kind of a weird kid. Well, I mean, it should be pretty obvious by now. I'm a poet, aren't I? I'm up here, so. But I learned an awful lot about myself out there, and so anyway, one of the things we did, my two cousins and I, especially the guy who was closest to me in age, he was a little older than I am. We used to wander all over the place, especially when the old folks went somewhere else and we were left on our own. And we loved to go places we weren't supposed to go. For example, we were told, don't go down by the old farmhouse where the farmhouse burned, because there's a well down there and you could fall into it. So, great idea. There's a well. There's a well down there. We got to go find that well. So Billy and I took off down. We found where the well was. We moved the planks aside that were on top of the well. We kept a couple of them hanging over the top of the well so we could put our arms around them and kick our feet. Anyway, we didn't fall in the well or anything, but at any rate, this is one of those wells that has rocks and they're in circles and they go down and down and down. So I always wondered how these things were made. So I did some research. I found out everything I could. Couldn't find out everything, so I made the rest up. And thus the title of this book, okay, The Digging of Deep Wells, and the title of the poem. The digging of deep wells involves the breaking of solid ground, stacking a circle's worth of sod between tree stumps, shoveling layers of damp and musty clay into wooden pails, and soon requires a ladder and a tripod of white-barked birch, and where it's joined, a wooden block through which passes 100 feet of sturdy rope. Then begins the lining of walls. Fresh-cut sandstone starts 10 feet down, builds up layer by layer tight to the top. Since there's no sign yet of gurgling water, the digger digs anew, goes down inside the present ring of rock with short-armed spade, sharp and heavy crow, hammers stubborn aggregate, smashes layered shale, load after deadly load sways up behind the rope. The lower he goes, the harder falling pebbles hit, the deeper the darkness. At ladder's full length, more layered circles of stone, hole gradually widening until this present wall provides foundation for the wall above. And by lantern light, the digger stands on broken rock, watches the ladder rise and disappear above the rim. The air is chill. Each clatter of crow, each scrape of shovel, each claustrophobic breath echoes up the hole toward the light. Past the rain of dust that coats the chilling sweat of neck and brow. And at the end of work, the bucket ends its day, his swift unbound, replaced by bosun's chair. Twirling, he rises to sleep, and then descend again and again, until one afternoon he stands in icy damp, hears the gush of stream and fresh water rise up, shock his weary groin. Filled up with sudden joy, he risks to look at what's above and finds as his reward a perfect circus of stars. This should be, next one is sort of what I think should be, if it isn't already, a bit of nostalgia certainly for Canadian kids who grew up a number of years ago. Charlottetown, I lived on McGill Avenue. It was quite a nice street. We actually weren't rich enough to live on it, but we lived there, and we did survive the petition that was moved around that tried to move us off there. But and then we moved to the country after that, and we had our house towed away, and my father was very proud, built a very nice house, and went deeply in debt, and somehow we survived that. But at any rate, it was a very nice neighborhood. A lot of people in the wintertime, a lot of the families would put rinks in their backyard. And the nicest one was behind the doctor's house up the street and around the corner. This is called Behind the Red Brick House, Charlottetown, PEI, 1955. I would have been about 10 years old. Dr. Joe and Colin and the twins stand in soggy sleeves behind their house. They lay the water down in shining pools night after night, and on frost-crisp mornings break up shells of tinkle ice that mar the thickening surface, then melt it down with steaming floods and leave for office and school, impatient for the work to end. Soon come nights when hordes of children shove inside the changing shed, fill lungs with kerosene-charged air, or sit and wheeze and tie their skates on ice lump mounds along the edge. Captains toss an out-of-season bat, pick shouting teams, and nets are coats or husks of snow. With eyes like young owls, we stick handle around figure skating girls and flirting pairs. No lifties is the rule. But pucks still fly. We scramble over banks and mine mounds of drift. We play till toes are trapped, laces locked in hanging icicles. We're never more awake than when we leave and crunch along streets, sticks across shoulders, hobo style, our skates lace-hung and steaming at our backs. And once in bed, we sleep so fast and dream of how we'll play the next game and the next. Sandra's gonna gong me when the time comes, I think. So you can. I'm not going to go on forever here. So much as I probably would if you let me. Anyway, Prince Edward Island, as you know, is a small island. But this poem is about a really small island. It's one down near where my grandparents had their home, and it was a place where we used to swim. And it was called Brudenell Island. It was a little tiny island that was a pioneer cemetery. And at first you had to wade out to get there, and eventually they built a little causeway. But I was fascinated with it because you could go out there and pretend this was your little kingdom. And anyway, it talks about a he there. It was me, I confess. It was. Okay, small islands. When he was small, the island where he lived stretched to infinity, far beyond the clover-clad meadows where he played along the river's edge close by his house, where dreams loomed large. Offshore, a tiny isle, red stack of sandy shale, wigged in squat spruce, graveyard for early pioneers, to which he liked to wade at lowest tide, and stroll among the shades, brush past fragrant needled skirts, loving how the shoreline boxed him in, so he felt safe. But as he grew, his islands seemed to shrink till he could see how small he'd got. And still, they boxed him in. And now, next, a succulent treat. For those of you who either grew up on a farm or spent time on a farm anywhere, and certainly in the long ago. This is a philosophical poem, and you will notice it's very deeply philosophic. And it's called Manure. Okay. When you are 12 and the day is warm, a pile of manure can seem a mountain, an inanimate thing lying like the leavings of a glacier on the hoof-worn ground behind the barn, or between the barns, sorry. Your cousin Buddy has parked the spreader on the roadway at your back, and you are the first to take your fork and break the sun-baked crust which pulls away like a well-formed scab from the back of some sleeping beast. And you discover you have entered the steaming belly of a living thing. There are colors there, shades that run and blend, that ooze and bleed, flies and grubs, worms that curl and slither. You could stand there in wonder and stare, but there is work to do, and so you dig and lift and toss, dig and lift and toss. Watch the festering pile shrink like mounded turnip on a supper plate. Feel the heat rise as histories of life and death arc across your shoulder into the waiting spreader. Now for the philosophy. For all that is not profit ends up here. That is not milk or cheese or cream or fat or meat. All that passes through and does not pass the test. The undigested bulk, the chaff, the seed, the stone, the drowned kitten, the fetal pig, the aborted, the stillborn, all here. All waiting to be spread across the earth to try it one more time. And this next one is for those of you who truly love little boys and animals. It's called Billy and the Rat. I don't know who set that trap. One of those steel-jawed things that could bite off a small boy's hand like a buzzsaw. Billy and I found it upstairs in the granary, in a trough, in a sea of oats, when it jumped in the air as we passed by, kicking a scatter of grain across our startled backs. The rat, clamped in its rusted maw, was young and scared. "Be careful, it could bite," I said, as Billy picked it up and set it on the bench along the wall. "He's too hurt," he said, and opened up the trap. "Are you going to kill it?" "No," he said, "his leg is broken. He'll likely die without my help. You stay here and watch him." The rat lay on the bench and watched me. With squirrel eyes, his round tummy rose and fell. Billy brought sticks and baler twine. I watched him sprint the rat's leg and hide him where Grampy wouldn't look. Every day we fed him milk from a dropper and bits of bread, talked to him, and touched him like a pet. The day the splint came off, Ratty was growing strong. And maybe it hurt him when we untied the string, made him lose his temper, and bite Billy inside the thumb where the skin is webbed like a bat's wing. Before Billy could think, his big hands moved fast, fingers strong from milking cows, snapped the young rat's neck and dropped him to the floor. "Damn stupid rat," he said, and ran, crying out the door. It took him a long time to get to the point where he could forgive himself for what he did. And it was just a reaction. This one's a little happier, and I'm doing this to myself. I don't know why I do it, but I really don't know why I do any of this. Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the reasons I do it is because I know that I've got a wonderful family, I've got a beautiful wife, and I've got the most amazing children and grandchildren. Absolutely amazing. And they've taught me how to love, and so has my wife. Anyway, this is my grandfather, and he was a grumpy old, excuse my language, he's a grumpy old bugger. He was a university graduate. His parents and his grandparents had been quite well-to-do. They were shipbuilders and they were merchants, and they were quite well off. By the time my grandfather and my mother, well, certainly by the time my mother came along, that was gone. The shipping building industry was gone, and there was a lot of trouble with the chancery courts with lost ships and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they were living on a farm, and I went out there every chance I got. I loved it out there, because they treated me like I was a person, and they made me work. I mean, child labor, right? But I loved it. I loved it. And in Charlottetown, it was like, get outside and play. Go on outside and play. Get out of my sight. Get outside and play. Down there it was, pick up that fork, get that manure in the spreader. Anyway, so this is called getting it right. The bucksaw will dance if you get it right, he says. You take your turn, and then you rest. You take me there, you follow me home. You pull, then I pull. You know the bucksaw? You've ever? Yeah. Okay. You pull, then I pull. When it's my turn to work, you leave me alone, and I do the same for you. Pushing a man only jams the blade and slows him down. For a while, the blade jerks and jams. But Grampy won't quit. Pull, release, follow. Pull, release, follow. Don't be a burden on the bow of the saw. Bear your own weight. Let your arm ride the saw's back lightly on its return, like fingers on the waist of a pretty girl. Let the saw's teeth float above the wood's wound as an eagle rides the air. Allow your mind to write a song upon the log between us. Pull, release, follow. Pull, release, follow. And then I understand. The blade flies free as a fiddler's bow. Sawdust brushes past my legs like dancers' skirts. Grampy smiles. How am I doing? How much time have I got? 10 minutes? Oh, good. I could read for more. Okay, some of these, I brought some of these along because the last few, I haven't published a book for a few years officially, but I've been writing with some people, some friends of mine, and one of them likes to bind her own books. And her name is Judy Goody. It's a PEI. It's Goday. It would be anywhere else, but on PEI it's Goody. Okay? Now she is, I don't know if some of you probably know David Helwig. David Helwig, he actually is an Ontario writer, but he's been living on PEI for quite a long while. And he's my golf buddy, and we're great friends. Anyway, Judy and I and David and Renee, another person, anyway, we do these things where we write and then Judy makes a book of some kind. So I'm just going to read, a few of these little things just for fun. Oh dear, my nose doesn't run all over the floor here. Okay, in this one we just took. This one is we took epigraphs from various well-known. Oh, thank you very much, Evelyn. Okay, thank you. That's better than the thing I was taking out of my pocket. It was dying from overuse. It was drowning. Got to use good poetic language when your nose is running. So. I'm not quite sure how to get in here. I'm sort of. I may have demolished it, but I got some out anyway. So yeah. All right, I'll try something here. Now, there's like some well-known poets on here, and then there's us. Okay, this one has an epigraph from Sylvia Plath from Tulip, the poem Tulips from the Ariel. I don't know if you're familiar. She was one of the most gifted poets ever, and her use of language is just unparalleled. She had some terrible times, and she suffered from, some terrible depression. And people hold that against her, and I don't think they should. I don't think that's right or fair. And it certainly shouldn't take away from the quality, from their respect for the wonderful writing that she did. So anyway, what we did is I took the epigraph. The water I taste is warm and salt like the sea, and comes from a country far away as health. So then I wrote my own little poem about a person who was a very good friend of ours who did the same sort of thing. And we knew her, and she suffered very seriously from depression, and her life went from total elation and joy to the most abysmal, most painful, most cruel, and unforgiving depression that you could ever imagine. I could probably make myself cry again, but I knew a woman who wore her life like a molten lead cloak, then cast it off and danced like light on water until dawn. For weeks each labored breath felt much like drowning, and then 100 hours when even hurt was full of song. I saw her curled up like a shrunken worm in her darkened basement, every pain-filled moment stretching to eternity, and next day rolling jokes like a chain smoker's habit, laughing her way through drinks, dinner, and dessert, the life of the party, until one snowy, manic afternoon, she drove to a favorite spot, braked, and piped in death. There's some poems, 5 minutes. So there's some poems that I've been warned not to read. So I have to respect that because we have a long drive home. So or an even longer walk, All right, I'll go to another one here. Okay. All right. Lately, she's taken shortcuts, so they're not all sort of completely bound books. But these are the Buzz, the Buzz magazine on PEI, sort of a little arts magazine in Charlottetown, and it's an amazing thing. It's got all of the arts happenings in the whole province. Anyway, they have a poetry column now, and this Judy Goody I mentioned, she selects poetry, and then at the end of the year she does them up in a little book. And this one is one of my favorite little ones. Well, this is one of mine that she put in there, and that's not why it's my favorite, but it's my favorite one because I happen to like it. So And this one we can all identify with because every one of us has a place in our house where we keep stuff. You know, we say, okay, what is this? Where's it go? I don't know. And it goes there, right? Okay. So this poem is called Sorting Bent Nails. Okay? All right. Today, the snow glides down winding slopes of still, cold air. It softens the outside world like a shroud of fine lace. I am staying close to home in spite of places I should go. Head stuffed up and weary, a fine excuse to rest my bones, pick at some chores, and write a phrase I've carried in my head and don't want to bury in my pillow or misplace among the bent nails I meant to straighten and that plastic thing I know belongs to something precious that we perhaps still own. Yeah. Okay, and and I told you that David Helwig is my golf partner. David is getting quite a bit older. He now has Parkinson's, and he's had it for quite a while. He has a lot of other things wrong with him, but he still plays golf, and he still plays golf reasonably well. And still, I mean, he don't have to play all that well to be better than I am, because I think I'm just his excuse to go out to the golf course. So, but anyway, so we play golf, and this is about what happens when winters comes and you can't go out and play golf anymore, and you're home and you're bored and you got all the nails sorted. Okay, this is called Unwinding. Okay, and this I think is going to be my last one because the signal was that the time is running out, and it will both I'll spare you too much more pain here. But anyway, 2 nights ago, and I was up here, Sandra, all this time, and I didn't tell them very much about our children. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, 2 nights ago, in spite of bitter cold and well past sunset, I carried my dusty driver out onto our frosty deck and set an imagined ball on its non-existent tee. Carefully, I looked off into the darkness over the river, while still and shooting stars looked down on me, perplexed. I addressed that waiting orb and placed my solid club face perfectly beside, my muscles slightly tensed and anxious. Then, low and slowly turned and lifted all that power up to circle round me there, a titanic deity of golf. Then let it go, and all unwound came speeding to the waiting ball, which blasted to its perfect orbit down the fairways of the sky. Yeah, look. Yeah.